Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom Podcast. My guest today is littel-wolfur on Urbit. That's his Urbit handle. And he is building a spaced repetition app, and that's how we originally connected. And so we're going to have a good conversation about Urbit and what it is, and spaced repetition and what that is, and whatever else comes up. So welcome to the show. So spaced repetition. When did you first start using spaced repetition? Actually, before we get into that, I'll give my audience a little intro into what spaced repetition is. It's basically we have a memory, and that memory used to be organized based off of an oral tradition. So we'd have to memorize things, words, songs, things like that, and they had memory palaces and such. And then we invented the written word, and then people figured out that if you write something down, it both helps you memorize it and creates a staple record. And then computers came along, and some scientist, I can't remember who, realized that there was an exponential forgetting curve. So whatever happens in a day, we lose 90% of it within 4 days, unless there's a timely reminder on the third or fourth day. And so the absolute nerds, one of which I am, realized that this could be really helpful to extend our natural working memory. And it's really helpful as long as you do it every day. And it's like the ultimate mix between being really lazy on a long-term scale timeline, and then, but also being sort of like you have to do it persistently in order for it to work. So it's this strange mixture of persistence and laziness. So with that, what is your experience with spaced repetition?
Yeah, so I started using it when I was doing my math degree. Then where you, I never, I'd heard about it because it was a big thing in like language, right? Um, but the thing that really turned me onto it was on Hacker News back in like 2007. There was this article posted, a Wired article about Peter Wozniak, who was the inventor of Super Memo. And when I saw that and like read this story about this dude who like runs his entire life off of this spaced repetition algorithm and wrote this like crazy Windows app to sort of facilitate this whole thing, I was like, oh my God, this is so sick. So
And have
I
you
so I
used the Windows app?
Oh yeah, I actually
Yeah.
used it exclusively for a long time. And I even had like a dedicated Windows PC to run this thing. And because the best thing about the Super Memo app was that it supported this thing called incremental reading, um, which was where you would read an article and you would just extract out pieces of the stuff that you were interested in, and then that would surface as flashcards, right? The coolest thing about the Super Memo stuff was not that it was like Anki level flashcards, but it was like and I don't know if you know what Anki is, but it's like
I
a
do.
open source, yeah,
That's what I
space
used.
repetition thing. But yeah, definitely more focused on like making flashcards, while Super Memo was much more focused on like learning, um, and learning in a way that was incremental, right? And the whole thing was kind of based off of just taking data, putting it into Super Memo, and then extracting things that would eventually become flashcards way down the line, right?
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, and so I got really into that, and I even started using it to like practice guitar, right? Where I would
Yeah,
have like
yeah.
full pieces that I would put in there. I'd practice for a bit, extract the parts that were like difficult, and then those would come up like in my later practice sessions, and it actually really helped like get better and memorize pieces, but not just in terms of like, oh, this is a thing that you remember, but in terms of like, oh, this is like the most efficient way of learning stuff,
Anything.
right? Anything, yeah. And so I even hooked up with this one guy way back. This was in college, who was really into like trying to sort of operationalize this in a way that wasn't on Windows. And so we talked a bit about it, but it's like these things, they don't really make money, right? It's
Yeah,
like
this is the strangest part about it is that the software is total shit over
total
and
ass.
over again. Like no, all of these software engineers who are using the spaced repetition for some reason can't put it into something that is really
Yeah.
easy. I mean, they're the consumer like Duolingo works off of the same thing. So Duolingo is technically a spaced repetition app, but it is the only consumer app that uses the spaced repetition thing, and it's not even billed as a spaced repetition. And it's so confusing as to me as to why nobody can build it. And I love what you said about Super Memo. It makes me want to go try that out because I've independently came across the same idea, which is that it's totally inefficient to create flashcards and memorize
Yes.
one piece of information. It's just so like that one piece of information is probably not going to be that helpful. And so what I
Yeah.
started to do in Anki is do closed deletions. Now that AI has come into the picture, I just copy and paste large sections of whatever I'm reading or whatever AI gives to me, and then I hide one word, not with the impression of trying to memorize that word, although I do that as well, but with the resurfacing that whole entire text in order to
Yeah.
gain familiarity with some sort of crazy thing that I want to learn, get a better understanding from a higher level. So I've
Yeah,
totally moved
SuperMemo had a
away from.
really advanced version of this, right? Like a
Okay.
really advanced closed deletion. I mean, I think most of the ideas that are in Anki that are good come from SuperMemo. Um, and pretty much all of the and I know SuperMemo had a more advanced spaced repetition algorithm that they've just been steadily building in, and I think it just got way too complicated.
Yeah.
It's worth trying SuperMemo. Like honestly, it
Okay.
is especially if you can get
Yep.
around the crazy UI stuff. I mean, the whole thing just takes over your computer the minute. It's like a virus, right? Like it literally like repositions your windows and does all this crazy shit, and you have to like modify some parts of like the system registry to get it working sometimes. It's insane. I
This
don't know
gets
if
into
it's
the other problem of these apps is that they're all wildly complex for no reason. Like
yeah, yeah.
there's no simplicity. Why hasn't anybody figured out how to do this simple? I want to do this. I currently am building the software building skills so that I can actually build an app like this. But I'm very far away from being able to do that. But I'm using Anki in order to kind of bring it all into it. But like, if I were to build something, it would be very simple.
Yeah,
Are
and
you?
it's like
Yeah,
that's the funniest thing about like this is a flashcard thing, right? It should be simple. I mean,
yeah,
it's probably the simplest app that you can imagine
yeah.
building, and so it's this is actually why I did it in Urbit as my first app. Was I was
Mm,
like, okay, well, I don't know how I'm going to build something on Urbit.
yeah.
Like, what's the simplest possible thing I could do? Well, it's a flashcard app, right? And so I built the flashcard part first, and then did the algorithm around it, and it was like very easy.
Yeah.
Um, and but like so I the SRS is what it's called.
Yeah.
Has been like it was like the first Urbit app, I think. At least the first one not built by someone who was like actively working on
Ardent.
Urbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I built it like before there was even software distribution. So it was like you actually had to modify, like the base desk, right? To install this thing. And so yeah, I built it there, and so it's actually been supported amongst like pre OS one, right? Then OS one, and then after software distribution came out, and then a bunch more Kelvins, right? Like I've had to maintain it since then. Pretty much no one's used it, but like I have actually used it a lot because it's how I memorize like all the runes, how I
Uh-huh.
memorize like how to pronounce everything. And it does have like a spaced repetition thing built into it, so it is the spaced repetition, right? But what I wanted to do with it was a lot more. I think like I wanted to make it basically like a learning platform on Urbit, right? Where
Uh-huh.
you could literally like um, take a class and use this as your
Yeah.
sort of backing, like kind of like Blackboard, right? But like good. Um, and so like building something like that on Urbit is I think immensely doable, right? Because it's like one of the things that Urbit purports to be good at is being able to sync or like link up with other apps, right? And make them sort of like you can sort of build these things by piece by piece, and then just meld them all together, and it works really well. It's I don't think it's on littel-wolfur, and it's also not even. I think my distribution ship is down right now, so you can't
Got it.
install it.
Okay.
So it's a secret app
Got
right
it.
now. Um, and I'm not gonna be developing it off of base Urbit anymore. Like so, the new one is gonna be on Shrubbery, which I don't know if
Yeah,
you've
please explain what
heard
shrubbery
about.
is.
Or
If you can.
I don't know if I can do
Yeah.
that, but I can attempt. So like shrubbery is this sort of not methodology, but just
Oh.
idea of what Urbit should be
Oh.
like, right? It should be this like just giant namespace that you can reference from anywhere, that you can sort of like everything on your Urbit should kind of be like a referenceable object that you can manipulate from any context and store in any part of your Urbit, right? Um, and so I think it it started as a conversation between me and Tim, back when I was at Twan, or not Tim, geez, Ted. um, uh, back when I was at Tlon about like how like Clay, right? Clay, the file system
Yeah.
vein, really suggested this like namespacing idea that really wasn't fully fleshed out amongst like the entire Urbit system, right? It was just kind of like, oh, there was these cares that you could use to like cat certain things from the file system, and you could list your directories and stuff. But there was like this suggestion, right, that okay, well, there was also a care for Gall, and you could like theoretically ls your app state, right? Ls as in like a command line
Yeah.
ls, right? And but like that was supported in like the generator for ls, but like no one used it and no one really knew what it was for. And so we were like, well, why don't we have this for every part of the Urbit system, right? Like why can't you just ls your app state? Why can't you just insert anything into your app state, or into Clay, or even into your network state, right? Um, and so we were talking about this, and then we just sort of kind of went away. But like there was still this idea that like, okay, well, you know why don't we shrubberize this, or like why don't we make this more namespacey? And then eventually like Liam came around and just like built this epic system that is just like actually Shrubbery, right? It's an actual namespace where you can create these like little sort of nodes, and
But what does it do for
just
you?
like
So this is very technical, and I love technical stuff. But what does Shrubbery, like? What does a namespace do for you that you didn't have before?
right. Okay, so one of the biggest things that I wanted to build with
Mm.
SRS was the ability to just like take from say your chats, right, and say like, oh, like what if you had just had this really long conversation with someone in like Minder Folden's group, and you wanted to just like take that chat and just extract it into a card and just
Got it.
read it later, right?
Got it.
And then but like now you would have to just copy and paste that from the chat, which is honestly really annoying on
Mm.
Urbit. For some reason, Urbit is not good at, you can't copy and
Yeah.
paste things
Yeah.
very easily. So I was like, well, like what if you just like, if you had the date, you could just like have a link to that node, right?
Right.
And because like back when I was building the space repetition stuff, we had Graph Store, right, which had a really nice way of just like, okay, you had a link to every chat message, so you could just put that into another app and then display it, right? So that concept, the concept of just having a link to something that happened on your Urbit and being able
Yeah.
to display it
Got it.
somewhere
Got
else
it.
on your
Okay.
Urbit, that is the
Got it.
namespace, right? So now imagine if that's just like not just chats, right, but anything, right? A notebook post, maybe even like something that happened in one of like your wikis, right? Like the new wiki app that I can't remember who built it, but it's really cool, right? Where it's just literally Wikipedia, but on your Urbit. Those posts, right? Like why can't I just reference them in a
Got it. So
flashcard
it's like a linking. So it's
and
like a
just
URL for a distributed peer-to-peer internet.
yeah, I mean it's definitely more
Yeah.
complicated than that, but like just from the end user's perspective, that is pretty much what it is. Like the ability to just like manipulate these objects in your Urbit's namespace as if they're like, file system objects
Got it.
almost. Um, and programmatically do a lot more with
Yeah.
them
Okay.
too.
Got it. So let's get into the more
Yeah.
high level of Urbit and the state of Urbit right now. Like where is Urbit right now?
I think it's in this like
Yeah.
transition phase, right? Where it's like, okay, there's these really big ideas that we're all really excited about, and they've all sort of come to
Mm.
fruition in many
Mm.
ways, and they've been kind of
Mm.
underwhelming, right? Um, and I think that like I honestly think that Shrubbery is the thing that saves
Mm.
all of us,
Mm.
because it like I don't know if you've played with any of it
No.
yet,
How do I play
but
with it?
and it's not really ready for anyone to
Okay.
play with at this point. Like I think you pretty much have to be a
Yeah.
developer right
Got
now
it.
to really be able to use it. Um, but like once you start using it, you're like, holy shit!
Yeah.
Like I can do anything on this, and like I can build something really quickly. Um, and I don't know if you've seen it. There's a couple of like sort of sneak peeks that the Urbit like Twitter has posted, and Liam has posted, and Will has posted, that like you can do really really amazing things with a small amount of code. Um, you can like list out, like you can turn a bunch of your data in your namespace into a table, for example, and then all of a sudden you have like a fully functioning like spreadsheet app from like 100 lines of code. right? And so like what's really cool about like that specific one, which is called Excel, is that you can pretty much use that tiny piece of code and use it to debug other pieces of code that you're writing, right? Because you can link to any shrub that you've made in your Urbit and just like display the results in a spreadsheet, and then concatenate those results and display something else in a different cell, which means you can just like basically have a debugging program like right next to the program that you're writing in the like UI that you're building this
And
for, right?
and so that feels like that is the promise of Urbit, is that Urbit
Yeah.
essentially allow, like, once you get over the extreme learning curve of learning this functional Hoon, that it is a much more simplified development process if you want to build something on a peer-to-peer operating system. Is that accurate?
Yes. I think that's true. And I also think that this is something that really hasn't been discovered by a lot of
Yeah.
non-Urbiters yet. In that, like, so like a lot of developers will bounce off of Urbit because of how
Yeah.
complicated it is, and so they
Yeah.
don't see the part
That's why
that you can get to
that's
where
why
it's
the
like,
schism happened, is a whole bunch of developers just got so fed up with this fact that it's not here yet.
yeah. Well, I mean, I also think they had
Other.
like really legitimate
Yeah.
concerns, right? That were definitely like very
Yeah.
business oriented, where it's like you can't build a product off of Urbit that can make you money in a
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
right? Like a lot of money
Yeah.
in a year, and that's kind of both a bug and a feature of Urbit in that like, and I feel like Stewart has talked a lot about this, where there's like there's this idea that you can make money on Urbit that
It's
just
not true.
doesn't really work
Yeah.
out, just because of it's a completely different paradigm, right? And it's open source in a way that just does not really allow you to make money in the traditional sense. Um, but I don't think that like I think Stewart has like, with fund and everything, has done like the most work in trying to actually make it a
Connection.
monetizable
Yeah.
platform. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's hard as a developer too. I don't think about these things very
Yeah.
much, right? I'm just trying to build something that's nice to use, and it's when you try to do that without thinking about like how to make money, you're not really going to make
Well,
any money.
on the short term, yes, I agree with you. But
Yeah,
the whole thing about technology, and this could get into a philosophical discussion about what technology is, before the rise of Web 2.0, most businesses needed to be close to developers and still do. Like
yeah,
the Microsoft, for example, was always about getting the developers on board. If you get the developers on board, the business itself will, yeah. 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 So like has been true for all of technology. If we're talking about software, developers are really important. And also there's this unfetteredness of any sort of innovation, which we've conveniently forgotten, is that everything comes from scientists and technologists playing around. That
yeah,
it's a byproduct that some of the things make money. But if you look at the whole history of innovation, like this concerted, we're going to make money off of this thing, can work, but it also could not work, and it could just be we could be it's kind of what's happening with all of Western civilization too, which is just like we have these things that we've created, and everybody's focused on the effects of the things that we've created. Rather, it's like the golden goose, the goose that lays the golden eggs. We're essentially destroying the goose because we like the golden eggs because they're so shiny and such.
yeah,
And like that's a global thing. And only recently have I discovered that this whole myth of progress in the 1900s may be that, and it might be a myth, and we might be running off of fumes of what happened in the 1800s, and that this sort
yeah.
of corruption that we're experiencing now has actually been going on since the rise of the welfare state, which is now I believe all of that. And that's like, I imagine everybody on Twitter that I used to kind of relate with from the technology world all thinks I'm crazy, but that's what I think is going on. And this,
Well, this is one of the most exciting parts about Urbit too, is that like, and this is one of those things that I will constantly like hear from people who are sort of Urbit
mm,
skeptics, is that like, oh yeah, like, how are you? What's your
practical.
product
You
market
got to be
fit?
practical. Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, like I have not seen any other culture or community that has been so into just building
Yeah. Yeah.
things, right? And it's like there's something so exciting about building stuff on Urbit that like you cannot recreate
Yeah.
elsewhere. At least I haven't seen it. And the minute I see it, like I will try and build on that
Mm,
platform, but no one else has done anything like
mm,
this. Like I I looked at there's this other project,
mm.
AOS. I don't know what it stands for. Some sort of like network file system thing, kind of like has some vibes that are similar to Urbit, right? Where you boot into like a command line and you can do stuff. But it's like it's crypto adjacent, so you get a lot of people who are really trying to make money off of it, and they don't see immediately what everything is for, and then it's really annoying. And Urbit really nicely just sidestepped a lot of that, right? Where it's like the people who get into it are building things, and if they're not building things, they're like supporting people who are, and they're getting really excited about what they're building. And yes, like I get it. There's a lot of things that have happened on Urbit that have made builders like sort of step away from it. And but that's just like it's growing
Yeah.
pains, right? I mean, like I have had to, again, I like supported this spaced repetition app through a bunch of different changes, and now I'm not really supporting it as much because of all these changes. But it doesn't mean I'm like not building on it, right? Like these things, it's still very exciting to build stuff on Urbit. It's just like you can't be static, right? You can't just sit there and say, okay, well, I'm going to build a platform that's just going to support everything that anyone has done from the beginning of time, and then it's just going to work, right? Like that's, I mean, I think this is one of the problems with like the Urbit sort of marketing, is that is what has been
Yeah.
that's
Sure.
what it's been marketed as, this forever computer that just never breaks. And it's like, no, that's fundamentally not true, right? Like it breaks all the time, but it breaks in a meaningful way versus breaking because of some random crap that some project manager decided to put into the product, right? No, it's like it's breaking because it's improving, not because it's fundamentally
I
broken.
love what you said about the crypto versus Urbit mindset of because it's crypto adjacent. That other app, AOS, is crypto adjacent. So
Yeah,
everybody's trying to make money, which is so funny because
yeah,
both Urbit and Bitcoin are they are long time horizons. Like
yeah,
I believe the founding sort of documents of Urbit go into the fact that this is about Mars versus Earth. Like this is a
yeah,
1,000 year timeline type of thing. Bitcoin is the same thing. Bitcoin like it's fundamentally reorganizing the sense of time. And here we are in this corrupt society that is collapsing basically because everybody's so focused on these details and trying to milk
yeah,
the detail, milk Western civilization for everything it's worth, like the secularism, that type of thing. Like it's just like it's so meaningless. And it's like, what have the smartest people who have been, what have the most of the smartest people have been doing over the past 10 or 15 years? They've been optimizing ads or going into finance and like, I don't have anything against making money. I want to make a lot of money. But also I don't want to do that and give up the long time horizon. And then it's so funny because then it
yeah,
just crypto just created this thing where it's like everybody's trying to make money all the time and they're meme coins and all this bullshit. And it's like, it's so weird.
yeah. And there's a
Yeah.
fakeness to it that is honestly so easy to
Yeah.
penetrate now. Now that we've seen this, like I really fell for it
Yeah.
early on.
Everybody does.
Like I like
Illusion.
there's that 2021 NFT
Yeah.
craze, that like I remember being at the assembly in Austin, for Urbit, and just like pitching these NFT things as like, oh, if we just hook this up to Urbit, like we'll all make tons of
Yeah.
money and like it'll be
Yep.
great. And I honestly thought that the people building these NFTs would be like super amped about it because like all of their art and their work that they put in towards writing these contracts could actually like last,
Yeah.
because if you put it on Urbit, like you can actually do things with
Yeah.
it. And it turns out that no one actually cared about any of that, and it was just to pump things up and quickly dump them. And it was like, I mean, it's obvious in hindsight,
Yeah.
but like,
During it, it's hard to pick.
that's
Yeah.
one of the coolest things about Urbit is like, whenever I was talking about it, like people were amped about it. It was exciting. Yeah, some people like gave me shit for it, but most people were like, oh yeah, that would be great.
Mm.
And I have seen that like time and time again with Urbit, and that like people are very optimistic, and I think that that's a trait in the tech world that is just really really hard to find in
Anywhere else.
like in
Yeah.
truth, right? Like you really don't see it. You see fake versions of it, but you don't see actual optimism very
Mm.
much.
Mm.
Um, and Urbit is like chock full of optimists, right? Like who actually think that this stuff will work and are confident in it, for good technical reasons too.
And they're all like
Uh,
crazy
and
developers.
the fact that kind of proven wrong on the short term is, I don't know, kind of bullish to me.
Yeah.
because it's like they're still here and they're still building stuff.
We could talk about Keynote too, and because it hasn't seemed like I've seen much coming from there either. And they are definitely going for the crypto route. And I want to do more interviews. I'm going to do another interview with the CTO. I've already done one interview already with him, Mathia on Twitter.
Oh,
And
nice.
but Urbit just keeps on chugging along, and like the people who are in it are really in it. Um, Tiller Tolbus, he said that Urbit is a religion, and if you understand it as anything else, you're missing the point. And so
Yeah.
that is really important for this long time frame. It's another thing. It's like how do you the long time frame? We're at the we're the corrupt system under which we all thought was true for the same reasons you mentioned of like the NFT crazy. It's going away. It's the people who are aware of patterns are aware that it's going away, but there's nothing to replace it yet. And it might be a long time. It could be a short time. We could have like a golden age in the sense of the UK kind of golden age in the 1600s or 1700s. Forget what it is, but they had a golden age back there, and it was like everybody thought everything was going to shit, and now all of a sudden it turned into a golden age, and everybody was like, okay, this is great. We're a non-violent, glorious revolution. That was what it was called, and so we could have that, but we don't know, because the future is always sort of unpredictable, and so Urbit is like a very long time frame, and so this optimism thing that you mentioned is really important, and all of us did it. All of us got caught up in the meme sort of 2021, 2022. We're all going to the moon. This thing's collapsing really quickly, and Bitcoin's going to replace it. And turns out, okay, well, that didn't happen. So I think we're all a little bit wiser in terms of how long things take. But we've got inflation, and the millennials too. The millennials, yeah, the U.S. like millennials, we just got such a weird deal where we were told it was a golden age that's going to last forever, that history's over, and what was going to happen in the 90s is going to happen forever, and it turns out it's not the case. The Gen Z is like was born into it, so they're used to it. But millennials are just like in this weird in between spot. And what's your thought on all that? I know I threw a bunch at you.
Um, I don't know. I mean, like I've seen some Gen Z people just I don't even know how to talk about it. Like they just seem
Yeah,
out of it. But I've also seen some ones who
yeah,
just like, I mean, I feel like Liam is one of these people who is just like has his finger on the pulse of just life in general, and just knows what's going on. And it seems like they are the epitome of like the bell curve with
yes,
no one in the
yes,
middle, right? Where it's like that's Gen Z, and that's honestly kind of exciting to
yeah,
me. Like I feel like the millennials like me have just been sort of lumped into. I mean, I feel like a lot of us are just in the
yeah,
middle of the bell
yeah.
curve, right? Just like through no
Mhm.
fault of our own, really. Just
Yeah.
we've sort of had to push our way to the edges, and I actually I have this like theory about like the like Urbit is like the Mobius
Mm,
curve,
mm.
not the bell curve, right? Where it's like you've got a bunch of retards on one end and really smart guys on the other end, but we're like sort of just merging in the middle. And you can just like walk right past the bell part and just get straight to the edges of each, and it's a really nice sort of uh, um, community, right? And like that, I don't see anything else like that on the internet, right? And uh, but I go through stages of this because like I have a kid
Mhm.
now, and I can't spend as much time
Yeah,
on the internet as I once
yeah.
did. And I've realized that a lot of what I've been able to build, and what I've been able to understand about the internet has really been a function of how much time I was able to spend
Mm.
on it. And now that I can't, I found myself a lot more sympathetic towards certain urban aspects, right, that are like slow moving, but also a lot less into the sort of esotericism of it
Mm.
all, right? Because I don't have the time to really like just absorb all of this stuff, and I don't have the time to like read, the Arvo source for 12 hours a
Mm.
day. And so I just can't. I feel very like I don't know the word for it, but if urban has to depend on those sorts of people and that sort of like time,
That's interesting.
then it's going to take a lot longer and it might never even
Yeah, well,
work, right?
that's a good.
And I think it does there does need to be like a little bit more of a um, ease of use push for Urbit to actually work out, because like people do need to be able to get into this system and build on it without having to spend, you know, hours going over these runic tomes, right? Like,
So that's a really important point, and a good question is how many people are coming in and being like you, who have spent years in this thing and just maintaining it out of this sense of sort of altruism on a on a long-term horizon. How many other people are coming in and replacing those who are having kids and such? Are there people still coming into it?
it seems
Yeah.
like it. I have noticed like that there has been a substantial amount of like new blood coming
Mm.
in. Um, Not necessarily like replacing
Yeah.
old blood, right? But just like adding to it as people can't spend as much time on it. And it's been really interesting to see, like, now that I've been in it for so long, that yeah, we are all starting families when we were just doing this on our own time. And like that's it's kind of beautiful, right? Like I haven't seen any other community really go through this. And maybe people in, you know, the 90s and early 2000s saw it,
Terms of-
but I certainly haven't seen it as like a relatively newer person on the internet. um, and then now it's like, okay, well, will Gen Z see the same thing, right? I don't know. It seems a lot, that seems a lot more, I'm a lot more skeptical that they will, but I don't know. Like people build their own little nests on the internet, especially
Yeah.
now. and it's honestly, this is what one of the things that I think Urbit really has going for it, is that you really can build a moat around your
Mm.
community with it that no other platform really allows you to do.
Yeah, it's like Signal, but
It's
what
like,
happens?
like things
Yeah.
like Facebook and
Yeah.
Instagram, they're so like
Extractive. Yeah.
evil,
Yeah.
you know, like fundamentally, like you can't do the things that you need to do to
Yeah.
connect with people. They actually make it hard for you to do that. And
Particularly given.
I don't see a lot of products coming out that can give you the sort of things that Urbit can give you. But you do need, and this is why I think Tlon is actually building something really useful, right? And before I was a lot more skeptical of like the whole social aspect of Urbit, and now I'm definitely not. And I feel like the more you build something that is easy to use and is nice to use, and you only focus on that, and you do it on a platform that is free like Urbit, then you really are doing something good for humanity.
That's a very good point, particularly given what's going on now in the UK. In case it takes a couple weeks to publish this, the UK is currently going through. The UK government is basically monitoring people's tweets and then going and showing up at their door if they said any misinformation, all of which is complete bullshit. And Twitter itself represents an interesting case for this because Twitter is run by Elon Musk, who is apparently on our side, basically. But the sides themselves in our falling society and civilization are essentially not what they appear to be, in my opinion. And that Elon Musk is going straight forward towards transhumanism, which has some interesting spiritual implications, which I don't think he's really cognizant of. And also, he feels like he's been captured by the reverse mind virus, which is that he's fighting some evil, which now has kind of created a sort of mind virus in him that the whole platform itself is falling under. And then Urbit, going this whole theme of this conversation is this like long time frame thing that may be setting up the next computing for the next couple hundred years, is kind of in the background offering this thing, but most people on Twitter can't even touch it because it's just so far beyond what they know to be relevant that it's a challenge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Twitter's a weird thing to me because it's like I think it's interesting. I think that there are a lot of funny people on it. I pretty much just only use it for
Yeah.
entertainment, but like sometimes I will get like, you know, mind expanding
Yeah.
things on there. But then I go into the comments and sometimes they're just like
And
porn,
AI.
and I'm just like what is
Yeah.
this? Yeah, like I don't want to see this, and it keeps showing up, and I can't prevent it. And I don't know. I
That's a
just
good point.
There's something fundamentally immoral about that like freaks me out. Um,
And
I don't feel like Urbit can suffer from those things as horribly, right? Sure, it can, you know, you can put porn on
yeah,
Urbit, right? But it's like
it's not going to be
I
thrown
don't
in your
have to
face.
see it. Yeah.
That's a really good point, and so I'll go into a little bit more analysis on what I think is going on Twitter. He bought the company with a sort of there's the altruistic motive, which is to save free speech, But then there's the behind the scenes motive as well, which is that he's building an AI cluster in Nashville, Tennessee, and he bought one of the best ways to get what's the best data for AI and training on AI, and then he's got his other Neuralink stuff. So there's all these like sort of business person. I'm a business person as well. I understand why he does those things, but there might be a division there, and the fact that all the advertisers have essentially jumped ship and are not paying for it. He's now got a bunch of users who are paying for him, paying for Twitter, and that might be increasing revenue. But I believe they went private, so I don't think we have the sort of SEC type of documentation about how much money they're making and such. So there's a lot of things that are just very like crazy. And what you mentioned is, now he's changed the algorithm in a very effective way from a business standpoint to monetize attention. How do you monetize attention? You maximize engagement. How do you maximize engagement? You play into the deeper, baser aspects of general human population, which includes porn, anger, fear, like all of these things that, like, as a civilization, we kind of moved past and created beauty, like moved more towards beauty. And so then there's this, like, it's like a cathedral basically. And I don't mean this in the cathedral sense that Yarvin talks about, but I'm talking about constructing a 400, 500 year cathedral, which Urbit seems like that's what it's doing, but in software. So that maybe like 300 years down the line, we have the ability to move away from this weird Wild West that the internet has created. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I think this is one of the things that keeps me on Urbit is that sort of beauty of building a system that is fundamentally simple in many ways, and the ways that in which it's complicated like are just they stem from the same things that make it simple. And you can build these very convoluted structures on Urbit that make no sense to anyone else. And you can to do the same thing that someone else would build, a super simple structure over. And you basically you can look at something like say GraphStore, right? GraphStore was really complicated, and one of the reasons why it was scrapped was because it was very hard to extend. And then once that was sort of revamped, you can look at the source now, and it's gotten complicated again. And so I think that there's going to be another revamping of how chat's going to work. But these things are very important to do, to just keep rewriting stuff until it becomes a more perfect version of the ideal, right? And I don't think that it's very easy to rewrite stuff nowadays in normal languages. Right? Like it becomes
It's a
this
Tower
sort
of
of
Babel.
giant mess. Yeah, yeah. And it's like to systematize the rewriting of things. I think
Yeah.
is a like software engineering project that hasn't really happened, right? Like no one's really made this like an actual thing to just keep rewriting stuff and point to the past and be like, oh look, this new one is better, or this new one is worse. The past is better. Oh, we're gonna just like merge these two, and now we have an actual better version. And I think Urbit is the closest thing to like reifying that concept, right? Of just rewriting stuff until it's perfect. Um, and it's actually worked very well. And I think you can see like the growth of Urbit, and like not user growth, but like technical
Yeah.
growth and how it's matured. Like you can see the points that have been the parts of it that have like the holes in Urbit that have been slowly made smaller and smaller, because of this like constant rewriting, and then the like complete revamping of certain things that like for example the build system, right? The build system was very very complicated. It was made very simple. Now it's made complicated again, and now there's an attempt to like kind of bring it into user space a little bit more. And these things like they influence developers a lot. And I think bringing it into user space, right? Like bringing these sorts of build tooling things, like sounds really boring and sort of technical, right? But like I don't think that users, like you developer users, right, have really experienced this like power before, right? Of being able to build stuff and like actually have like a compiler just building tiny things and being able to link these things together like in user space. Like back you used to be able to do this in C all the time, right? Like, and like dynamic linking was a thing that, causes a lot of problems, but also like is very, very powerful. And kind of bringing that back in a certain way without like completely destroying,
Mm.
your entire software project is interesting, right? Uh, there's many things like that that I think Urbit nowadays has explored, and that sort of power is non-existent in other systems, right? You can't do it. You have to follow the rails. I've
Yep.
kind of compared it to like Urbit is the sort of like EverQuest in MMO terms of the programming world right now, right? It's like, or maybe even better, it's like the worm, right? Like the open world, sort of, you can do whatever you want, you can build whatever you want, but it's scary and you'll probably shoot yourself in the foot. Whereas every other programming language right now is just instances of like new World of Warcraft,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
just a theme park, right? Like you have to follow these certain things. If you don't follow these certain things, you're not going to have working software, right? Like it's not going to happen. I mean, and that's the thing about Urbit that's so fun, is that like you can build whatever the hell you want and you can make it work.
There's a lot that I can respond to there. The thing that's been appearing a couple times is the fact that AI is now adding to this Tower of Babel. So we've got
Yeah.
the Tower of Babel in terms of software computation, where there's just like, it all started with COBOL and C and the terminal and assembly and all these, like, and then everything's just an abstraction on top of an abstraction off top of an abstraction, that you no longer need to think about those deeper layers of abstraction, and that could collapse, but it doesn't seem like it's going to collapse, except in the sense of just mind-numbing complexity. But now we have this AI thing, and I'll explain more about what I'm doing with it, which is that as long as the language itself is really well represented in the training data, I no longer need to understand what's going on in the code that it gives me, and I just stitch it together, and I'm creating websites, and it feels like almost like a waste of time to go and figure out what it is giving me. Except I run into these problems that I ran into it all day today, which is that I go on Cursor, which is the AI empowered IDE, and I go and I do all of these things. But to get it running, all the dependencies are just insane. And I have like one problem with my computer, the way that it's set up, and I don't know whether I did it or whether it's the computer itself, but I can't get. I have to, first of all, I have to put Python/m, then pip in order to install anything in the Python thing. But then like Node package man, I think I'm just going to switch all the way to Node, because apparently if I have Node and React, what? Yes,
Is what you're saying. Absolute
yeah,
hell. Like this is dependency hell. This is my problem with
yeah,
AI, right? It's like, yeah, you can get pretty far, and like on the happy path, you can get really
yeah,
far. But the minute you run into
yeah,
trouble and
yeah,
the AI can't
yeah.
help you, like you're fucked, and there's nothing you can do.
And so does
Like
Urbit solve that,
it's
or Urbit can solve it?
no, I think it
Yeah,
can, but like,
20 years.
and so like one of the nicer things about Urbit is that like, and I've used Claude
Yeah.
with me,
Okay.
and it's worked pretty
Okay.
well. And the substrate over which Urbit like
Yeah.
exists is not as deep,
Yeah.
right? And so like you don't have to have these like really deep dependency trees, um, and you can pretty quickly figure out what's going wrong if it is a
Mm.
dependency issue. Usually it's not, because you have to like manually include dependencies with Urbit.
Oh,
So there's no sort of like tooling issue that you'll run into with
yeah.
AI and like Hoon and stuff, because like it really is
Hmm.
simplistic, right? And that's one of the things I really like about it. But like I have used AI like extensively in all of my projects, and at this point I've like pretty much stopped using it, because it just leads to a problem. If like the minute you get like really, like you're actually trying to build something
Yeah.
complex and not just the sort of like
Yeah.
toy, it causes way more problems than it's
Yeah.
worth, right? Like, yeah, you can have it generate this like really nice looking thing that looks good at first, but then like it has this fundamental hole in it that you're not going to discover because you don't understand what this thing is actually doing. And then you're going to build on top of that like black hole forever, until you realize, oh shit, I just got to rip all of this out. And then at that point, you have like probably learned enough, right, to actually have just done it from scratch in the beginning. And then, like, I really feel like AI is just going to make people like really
Yeah.
lazy if they're not careful with it. Because I think it can really work well if you do know what you're
Yeah.
building. But if you don't know what
Yeah.
you're building, then it's just going to it's going to build you shit. Like
Interesting.
it's just not going to work.
Even Claude for things like Python or React.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I mean, like I did this the other day. Like I've been building this like what do I call it? Like it's like a Magic the Gathering like
Uh,
library on
uh,
Shrubbery, and I wanted to just build like a browser
yeah.
for it, right? So like it's like talking to Scryfall, which is like this API to grab cards from,
Interesting.
right? That part like that was really nice to build with AI, right? Because it's just an API. So I'm just like, okay, construct like the calls that I need, the API like directory stuff, right? That was easy. But I knew what I was doing, right? I knew that like that's the it is just writing API calls for me. That's what AI is good for. But the minute I started trying to get it to like, okay, can you design like a UI for me to like display these things? I ran into all sorts of issues where it would just make up random dependencies. It would use like CSS classes that I really
Yeah.
didn't
Okay.
need. And it's like by the end of it, like I had this like giant cruft of
Yeah.
shit that I just had to whittle down, and then eventually I whittled it down to the point where I could have just written that whole thing on
Yeah.
my own if I just like read a little bit more, if I was a little bit more disciplined about like what I need to learn here instead of just being lazy and not actually like looking at this UI framework that I was
It
using,
was.
right? And so it's like
What was the UI framework?
it's just like I think I mean, it's built into Shrubbery, so it's called
Oh, okay.
Feather, and it's just like these like CSS
Got it.
classes, right? If I just looked a little bit more carefully into how these CSS classes worked, I could have just used that,
Got it.
right? Which is like much better than just asking an AI to do things for you, because it'll just do the most amount of work in the shittiest way possible.
And there's also something to be said about how to get the AI to do what you want in a very specific way. Like that
Yeah,
there's some, yeah, and it's basically what I'm trying to do is figure out whether it works. I today, like before I ran into the dependency hell today, I made a lot of good progress in terms of things that I've never been able to do, of getting a Flask app, getting it routed all in the right way. But yeah, it's sort of like an experiment. I'm wondering how much I'm wasting my time doing this. It feels like I'm learning a lot about, from a meta angle, how technology works, which could be helpful in other use cases, and maybe even for hiring to like build things that other people can build, and maybe also bring in Upwork contractors. So get the AI to kind of architect the app, or me understanding enough about architect to understand all the different pieces, and then being able to bring in Upwork to build the pieces that it should be have a human to actually build. Um,
yeah. I mean, that seems like, and I think there are smart ways
yeah,
to use AI. I just think it's super
yeah,
dangerous. Like
mm,
you can really quickly get either too confident
yep,
in how much it can actually
yep,
give you, or you can just get lazy,
yep.
right? And I think both are a huge problem. Like, but I think they're kind of the same thing. Like that the laziness that you'll get from thinking that an AI can define all these things for you, um, is going to be fundamentally related to how confident you are in actually doing things.
Yeah,
Um, and I think that like the it could be a plus, right, in some
yeah,
situations, right, where it's like maybe you really do need some sort of fake confidence in
yeah,
order to
yeah,
build
yeah,
something
yeah.
complicated,
Interesting. Yeah,
especially in this world, right? Like it can be
yeah,
helpful, but yeah, I think like the ways in which AI make you makes you lazy are the things that I want to fix with like having a really nice way of memorizing things, which
yeah,
kind of seems like uh, separate, right? But it's like memorization is really really
yeah.
important, right? It's not like I don't think an AI can memorize for you.
Mm,
I mean, it can't mentally, like it can't. Like there's this whole idea of like the
yeah,
second brain stuff, and like I've gotten a little bit into this, right? Like
yep.
Obsidian and Rome and all these things, like they're great, but I think they should all be tools to just construct flashcards.
Yes.
That's fundamentally what I think they should be. Because like if you don't have that shit
Yeah,
in your brain at some level, even if it's just the like
yeah,
links, right? Just those like edge graph links. If those are there in your
yeah,
brain, and then you can reference things in your
yeah,
second
yeah,
brain or whatever, fine. You're set. But those things have to exist at some level. And the only way that you get those things to exist is to
yep.
memorize shit, right? Like that's the only way. And whether that memorization is done through flashcards or through just like pounding your head against a textbook, right? Like that, it's the same thing. The end state is the same. Is that like you have those node links somewhere in your head and you can use them.
So this gets, I would love to end on this, going back to the spaced repetition, because what we both agree or what we both use with this algorithm is an example of transhumanism, which is
Yeah.
that we are now depending on the computer to do something for us. Uh, but I think transhumanism, like most things, is one giant thing that can be subdivided into various ways. And I like to talk about the difference between naive transhumanism versus sort of transhumanism of using a tractor or using a computer and
Yeah.
treating it like a tool instead of becoming the tool itself. Which is, I just realized that's a good, the tool, the 90s, 2000 insult of becoming a tool is happening to a lot of people, like literally happening
Yeah.
to a lot of people. And Elon Musk represents the most interesting version of this because he's a full-on transhumanist and thinks that AI, like they started OpenAI with this theological belief that AI is going to become this existential threat that they know somehow they know that this thing is going to have its own agency and it's going to destroy us all, and so we need to prepare for it by merging with the machine. And I'm like deeply critical of that, particularly given what happened in 2020 of this just insane belief that technology is going to solve all of our problems. And what I'd be curious about what your thoughts are on this. Like, do you consider yourself to be a transhumanist? Like, what's the, yeah.
I kind of stopped thinking about all
Mm,
this,
yeah.
honestly. Like, and it's that has been the most successful thing that I've done. And
Just
from my
yeah, yeah,
perspective,
yeah.
because it's like I started like the reason why I know about Moldbug and
Yeah,
how I discovered Urbit was because I was like a huge less
yeah.
wronger.
Oh,
So like
interesting. Yeah,
I read it
yeah.
religiously. Like I even commented and wrote posts and stuff. And like I was really into that whole thing. I worked at the Singularity
Wow.
Institute and then what became the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. Like I was a bitch
Yeah,
intern, right? But I
you were in
still
it.
worked there. Like I went to their offices in Berkeley and worked there for a bit. And that was like, I mean, I was into it, and I was into it because I wanted to do like the math around the logic
Whoa.
of AI and stuff. But like that was when I saw like the results and like what people were actually doing there and how they were just like sort of talking circles
Yeah,
around each other. I was like, oh, this
it's
is
weird.
I don't like
Yeah.
this, right? Like I don't want to just talk about these things. Like I feel like you can. I mean,
Mhm.
this has been my biggest issue with math. Like I did a math degree and I was going to get my PhD, and then I was like, wait, we're all just like building this crazy weird
Mm.
like fake thing that we're all just like using logic to navigate when it's like what are the practical results here, like what are we actually doing, why waste our time just like talking about all these things without any evidence that any of this stuff is real. um and it's like there's a counter argument here where it's like, okay, well, the things that become real when you're talking about math are like 200 years
Yeah,
down the line, right? We're
yeah,
like, which is crazy to think about, right? But it's like I don't think I'm not Grothendieck, right? Like I can't like conceive of these things, and so I would rather like just be aware of them and like be careful and not let these things like get into my head as like pop sci
yeah,
bullshit, right? And just like do stuff,
yeah.
And so when I think about like transhumanism, I'm like, okay, well, like I think computers are really really good for algorithmically telling you what to do,
Mm.
right? Beyond that, right? Like trying to act as if they are some sort of like
God.
creative expert in their own right is like just fundamentally weird. Like I don't know if there's a certain thing that like I've noticed about AI art, for example, where it's like you look at it and like, yeah, technically it
Yeah,
looks right, technically it looks cool, but like it evokes no
yeah,
emotion in me
yeah.
at all, at all. But I have noticed that like you could totally just spec things out, right? Spec things out as an artist using AI art and make something beautiful, and I will think it's beautiful. But like you can't tell an AI to make something beautiful and have me respond to it, right? And I think the same thing is the case for software. Like you can make an AI like write something that approximates what you would build, right? But the minute you try and use that thing, you need to put like your own sort of spirit into it, right? or otherwise it's just going to be like an absolute fucking mess, and no one's going to use it, and you're just going to feel bad about wasting all of your time, trying to tell an AI to build you
Yeah, it gets
something.
into craftsmanship, which
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like and that's the thing that has kept me on Urbit is like it is
craftsmanship.
the
Yeah,
one language. Yeah, that really you feel like you're in a wood shop. You
yeah.
feel like you're like carving away at something or like, making sculptures and stuff. And every other language I've ever worked in has felt like I'm just patching together bullshit.
uh, yeah, and that's like the future of is craftsmanship going to return with all these crazy tools that have this power, but false power. It's like lack.
Yeah, it's false
Yeah.
power. Like it doesn't. It's like a yeah. You can make all these like shiny little
Mm,
things and like little baubles all around and put them all over yourself, but like you're just gonna look like an
mm.
asshole, right?
And feel
Like
like one.
it doesn't actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that craftsmanship is going to return, but again, on a longer time scale. It's like we're so early in terms of this, like the corruption falling down. Well, that was a brilliant episode. Thank you so much. How can people find you? I guess most of the people who probably listen to this far are probably deep into Urbit, so they probably already know who you are. But if not, how can they find you?
I'm on Twitter, littel-wolfur on Twitter. With it, it's not little like L-E, it's E-L.
Yeah, so
That's in the notes.
LITTLWOLFUR. So go find him on Twitter.
Yeah.
I'll post this to Twitter. Is there any way I can post it to Urbit? Is there anywhere where I mean, my thought was just post it on a YouTube channel and then a link.
Post it on rumors.
What is it?
Post it on
Rumors.
rumors.
Oh,
I
interesting.
don't know.
Yeah.
There's also Trill, but
Does it? Can I post video files on
the
Trill?
oh, video files? I think
Yeah.
so. I
Yeah.
don't know.
I'll go check it out. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That was fun. Do I